Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us. My name is El-Sharif, and I'm a steering committee member here at ACE. ACE is a global community of machine learning practitioners and researchers who have gathered around topics in AI engineering, research, and products. We have a repository of YouTube videos that showcase authors presenting the research and practitioners demonstrating the use of emerging machine learning methods in the field. We also host social events where you get a chance to network with your fellow community members. We also conduct workshops focused on helping participants take machine learning concepts from foundational theory all the way to fully deployed models. We have multiple streams organized around specific topics, and this presentation is part of our AI product stream. We encourage you all to subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out our website at ai.science. Today, we are hosting Ashley Beattie. Ashley is the head of DevOps transformation at Agile by Design, where he helps clients realize breakthroughs in organizational and team effectiveness. He also works part-time as a naval reservist with the Royal Canadian Navy. Thank you for your service. Ashley successfully launched a number of AI products in the area of marketing and advertising optimization. He received his MBA from McMaster University, majoring in management of innovation and new technology. Before I turn it over to Ashley, I will briefly share with you the motivation for his talk, and that is despite substantial investments in AI projects, a significant percentage of these projects fail to make it to production or offer even marginal value to organizations. Therefore, a disciplined and systematic evaluation of AI projects is needed to deliver successful AI products. Ashley will be presenting the AI Canvas as a product assessment tool and demonstrating its use through two examples. It is a very interesting presentation, and I'm looking forward to it. To the audience, please post your questions in the chat, and we will be asking your questions immediately after the presentation. So I will now turn it over to Ashley. Please take it away.
Thank you ever so much. So thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you to the extended ACE community for welcoming me to be giving this chat today. So topic for the conversation today is operationalizing, pardon me for the word there, the AI Canvas for AI product success and profit. So about that success bit, it's really not delivering on the promise that a lot of people want. So Gartner's recent view of this is that 85% of the AI projects won't deliver value to CIOs. And the CIO is typically in charge of digital transformation in a large organization, and they're not seeing that transformative benefit. Additionally, 87% of AI projects never make it to production. So we may have built it, but we actually never deployed it. And that's a bit of a challenge, but even still, firms continue to increase their investments in AI. So New Vantage Partners' Big Data and AI Executive Survey 2019 shows that large companies are essentially doubling down on AI. So you're seeing a lot of firms increase their investment in the $500+ million range, as well as the $50 to $500 million range. And you got to think, like, why invest in the face of such failure? Well, when it comes down to it, they feel like they have to. And it's driven through not only a fear of disruption, where 75% report that they're actually afraid of being disrupted if they don't do AI. And this driver, what they're hoping to get from it is not only this digital transformation, it's increased agility, or it's a better competitive advantage of sorts. So 91% or so are saying that. But even still, what is the real challenge here? So we know what the urgency is. And if we look at the stats themselves, it would appear that technology is becoming less of a problem. So the technology solutions as of 2019 survey, that only represents 5% of the challenge. Now, what about the remaining 95%? Well, it's things like this. So lack of organizational alignment / agility, cultural resistance, the ability to understand data as an asset, and executive leadership. This is the remainder of the 95%. And it would appear that the AI adoption problem is actually people. And I leave this up just for some comedic relief almost, but if we dive down a little bit, what I'm saying that we need to do is that we need to shift our focus a little bit. And all of the amazing technology that we built over the last call it 10 years or so of AI focus hasn't really translated into the products and solutions side of the business. So while it's not as big a problem as it once was, the fact that we've got all this amazing tooling to build these models and these solutions faster means that if we don't do something different, we're going to end up with more products that don't meet the fit criteria. So what I'm hoping is that we can start aligning around this problem, which is AI solution fitness and making capital P products that solve capital P problems for capital's people. And if we think about that, what we need to do is we kind of need to look a little bit at what we can do to resolve that. So to humanize this approach. And that's kind of what I want to do today with this talk. So I've got 3 goals, which are aimed around the objectives of humanizing and people-proofing your AI solution. So first goal is I'm going to give you a tool that gives you a viable starting point for the conversation around AI initiatives. And this is going to help you align your expectations around your stakeholder groups and bring in those side conversations that will kind of talk about these edge criteria for actual effective value delivery. Going to include some normative and inclusive perspectives and governance, hopefully enabling you to reduce the probability that the organizational antibodies outright reject your solution, i.e. the people stuff. And with this as a foundation and a footprint, you can start your AI initiative on the path towards productive technical discovery. So consider this the what of this talk. Now, coming from like an agile coaching and agile delivery background, we probably all have a board looks something like this, or we probably have something like this that takes things that we consider as opportunities, and then we slowly develop more resolution on it to get an idea of what we want to build. We don't just want to jump straight into development. So the first step on this process, and the one I'm going to take you through today, is the opportunity sketching component, which is we're going to fill out the AI canvas. And what we're hoping to do is to do those things I was just talking about, which is to increase the resolution around the project. Now, what is this AI canvas I'm referring to? Well, it's hard to say who actually invented the canvas idea, but the business model canvas probably came from either Eric Ries from the Lean Startup Movement or Steve Blank of AOL, who championed this idea of a one-page business plan. And the idea here is let's get everybody on the same page. And that way we can have that shared understanding of what we really want to do. And in product development or product design or almost any new initiative that we do in my business or ones that I work with, the canvas is the real starting point. Now, in the context of the AI canvas, it was originally conceived in prediction machines. It's a rather popular book. Looks like this. I recommend it for everybody to take a look at it. And it's written by Ajay Agarwal, Joshua Gans, and Avi Goldfarb of the Rotman School of Business. Excellent book. I highly recommend you pick it up because it really includes a lot of perspectives around enabling your AI initiative to become a little bit more successful. But it was written in 2017 or 2018. And therefore, it doesn't really bring into view all of the new views that people have brought from the leading sides of the industry. So what I've done is I've extended it ever so slightly, and it incorporates stuff based on my experience in innovation and new technology, product design and development, and also some more normative perspectives from some other people in the field. So let me take you through it. So this is what the AI canvas looks like right now, and it's a lot on one page. So I'm going to take you through it in stages. The original AI canvas looked like this. So this is the green outline text, and this is the stuff that's in the book. Okay, and all I've done is I've added some guiding questions to make it a little easier to fill out. We've layered onto that another perspective from an excellent academic. Her name is Tina Eliassi-Rad, and she's from Northeastern University in Boston. And I recently had the distinct pleasure to take in her ICCS presentation on just AI. And she spoke at length around AI products and needing to take a more humanistic approach to developing them. And I'm going to start from the bottom, so number 3 on the list here. her take-home message number 3 here is that a good way of getting AI solution fitness is to essentially pair the prediction machine with the human exemplar who's actually performing the prediction and making the decisions alongside it. So start with that. Additionally, layer on top of that the incentives and the views of the experts in the field on why they would really want to do this, or why they would be incentivized to bring in this kind of a perspective. The top one there is incorporating normativity. So this is bringing in those human viewpoints and what is right when you're developing this solution. We all know AI is an amazing tool, and I'm blown away by what it can do on pretty much a daily basis, maybe even more frequently than that, to be honest with you. But the thing that it does that we don't yet know how to program it to do is to become more humanistic in making its recommendations and bringing those contextual factors in. And the words, the task, the experience, and the performance measures, he's directly bringing from one of the other leading voices in the field, Tom Mitchell, who has pretty much pioneered the modern definition of AI. And I'll just read it out. A computer program is said to learn from experience E with respect to some class of tasks T and performance measure P, if its performance at tasks T as measured by P improves the experience E. And it's a funny way of saying that, can I, from the tasks that I do, if I measure what performance I get, can I feed that back in and get a better result? And what I've done in the AI Canvas here is I've overlaid both of those the perspectives from Tina, these contextual and normative factors, as well as essentially the viewpoint from making things around the experience, the task, and performance measure. Now, the last little bit that I want to kind of present here as an extension is the view that is kind of echoed here from Jurassic Park. And this is where we need to start thinking about not whether we could do something, but whether we should do something. And there's a viewpoint right now, which is why use AI? And that's kind of what I'm going to try and document or help you think about when you're going through this process. And the why also sometimes relates to us, the technical people. So we are a very excitable bunch when we're building stuff. And sometimes we can get really excited and involved in a problem that doesn't necessarily generate the value we would want. We're more excited by the problem than the solution. And if we're doing that a lot, we're probably not focusing on the high value items. So let me go forward and show you where that fits into the AI Canvas here, which is this middle bit here. So these are the human factors and answering that why AI question. So against that backdrop, this is what it looks like. And even though it's a lot of text, I'm going to take you through it. Before I get to that, though, pardon me, I do want to say this, that by the end of filling out your Canvas, you're going to end up writing a sentence that looks like this. Okay, so when an event happens, if we could enable a given actor to predict whatever it is we want to predict, they would have an unfair advantage when making a judgment on why and take action accordingly, realizing a specific outcome indicated by a success metric. Consider this your AI product mission statement. And by everybody that is involved in this, this deliverable, if they can all align around this sentence, you have a very, very, very good chance of gaining the energy and the momentum from the stakeholders that would have participated. So by the end of it, I'm hoping that you can take this sentence, put it on your wall, and say, this is really what we want to do. So the first example that I'm going to take you through is I'm going to help bettors beat the odds of the Kentucky Derby. So we're going to use AI, or we're going to think about using AI for this use case. And for the people in the audience that aren't necessarily aware what the Kentucky Derby is, very quickly, it's probably the world's most famous horse race. And you're trying to pick between about 20 horses, which one's going to come in first, second, or third, or any of those. There are a lot of exotic betting options, but that's really not the purpose of this. I'm just kind of putting that as the backdrop. So we're trying to win on horse races. So here's the AI Canvas. We're going to start filling it out together. Now, the top level, the contextual parts, I think are pretty straightforward. So I'm going to do those rather quickly. So it's the Kentucky Derby. It's a giant horse race. It's a rather old industry. The two main actors that we're dealing with here are either bettors, i.e. people that are making bets, or bookmakers, people that are assigning the odds to those bets. So they're, it's like this adversarial relationship. And when does this really happen? What is that situational context? It's when the horse runs the race. At the end of the day, everything is uncertain until they really start. Now, the first stop on our tour of the AI canvas, I'm going to start at the prediction. And the prediction is really an understanding of what would be helpful if we knew it, what would be helpful in making better decisions. And just think of this sentence, right? So if a given actor knew prediction, they'd have an unfair advantage. And in this context, it actually reads like this. If bettors or bookmakers knew the running order of the horses, they would have an unfair advantage. So that's really the unfair advantage we want to pull out of the AI. Lay on top of that the judgment / decision. So if they had this unfair advantage, they would know whether to bet and how much to bet in the case of the bettor. Or in the bookmaker, they would know how to price the odds. The action that they would perform in response is they would place the bets hoping to win, or the bookmaker would offer odds. So those are pretty straightforward in this use case. As well, the input data. So what are we going to feed into the system when we call it jockey info, horse info, the weather, you name it. There's a lot of factors we can take into account. What we're really trying to train on is the total amount of time. And what we're trying to do is we're also going to feed back, not only the results we've got so far, but as the model runs more frequently, we will enable that to feedback and continuously improve this algorithm. The last part, so who should teach the machine? Well, we're probably going to want to talk to some people that know a lot about this. So let's find those experts. Let's get those subject matter experts. Let's get that bettor. Let's get those bookmakers. Let's incorporate their perspectives when we build this model and we know what we're optimizing for. Here's where I want us to take a little bit more time as well. So this is the human factors. This is going to answer that why AI. So the first thing is, do actors know with certainty they're making the right decision? No, obviously not. You never know what's going to happen when it comes to horse racing. There are like 10 to the 28 different possibilities that are available when you actually run on race day. So it's a rather uncertain event. Can and do people need to explain their decision-making processes? So no, and it's probably valuable that they don't. This is their unfair advantage. And are there policies? Yes, there are. And horse racing is a bit fast and loose, but there is a jurisdictional affair here, and there are some bans that can happen if you win too much. What is the threshold to accept or refute predictions? Well, that really depends on your risk propensity and how serious are mistakes and who pays for them. Well, it's not life or death, hopefully. You haven't bet your leg or something like that on the horse. And who pays for mistakes? Well, the participants in the bet. So if we kind of save that, we then come out to the outcome. So this is when you're starting to consider those second order effects of what you're actually doing. And this is, well, what you are optimizing for is to make money systematically and hopefully reliability. But in the case of horse racing, if you built this, you're likely to remove this fun certainty. It's actually a term from the thing, or from horse racing, which might destroy the industry. So always kind of take these second order effects into account when you're building this. So if I kind of add this all together, we read the sentence. So if we're going to align around this, we're all looking around at the table and we go, okay, so the thing we want to do, our mission statement is, when the Kentucky Derby happens, if we can enable bettors to predict the running order of the horses, then they would have an unfair advantage when deciding which bets to place, and would make winning bets accordingly, making money, indicated by the increasing number of bets won. So this is now your AI mission statement. And this is something you're going to use with your team to align around what you're actually optimizing for. Notice I've not ever mentioned which model to use, or how to do the training, or where I'm going to get the data from. That's not as interesting right now as us really defining what the problem is and what we really want to solve for. The next example I want to walk you through is where we're going to identify tumors associated with prostate cancer. So I found this really, really cool article a couple of weeks ago, or actually about a week and a half ago, where it says here, artificial intelligence identifies prostate cancer with near perfect accuracy. And I was like, wow, this would be an incredible use case to see where the AI canvas either would have been helpful or whether we would have brought different perspectives in when we did this. So to overlay the situational context here, so we're using AI to identify cancerous prostate tumors. And prostate cancer is a hideous illness and is likely to kill about 33,000 men this year. The method of doing the diagnosis, you take a biopsy, it's called the CNB or a core needle biopsy, and you visually identify the parts that are either cancerous or not, and you assign it what they call a Gleason score. A Gleason score is really based on the pattern that you're seeing in the core needle biopsy. Typically, you would inspect them twice, where you have one doctor that does the initial review and then you have a second doctor to do it. That doesn't happen all the time. And additionally, not everybody's essentially equivalently experienced, and there are a lot of false positives. And I think it's funny from this article here, most cancers score a grade of greater than 3. Well, what about the rest of them? And what about the ones that are less than 3? What would we do in that case? Well, that's the AI challenge in front of us. So let's start with the AI canvas. So the top level, what is the system context? Well, we're dealing with oncology departments at hospitals, and I want to focus on just one part of this, which is these hospitals, they really want to standardize the care. They want to remove the bias. They want to remove the variability to increase the probability they have consistent outcomes from their processes. Who's the actor? So we've got doctors on one side, and we've got patients. Both are pretty much incentive aligned that they want to increase their survival rates. But both are also aligned around this idea that no one's going to take a crazy adventure when it comes to treating stuff. We're going to go with the tried and tested and true, more than likely to do the revolutionary one. And pretty straightforward. What happens is patient gets a biopsy, the doctor looks at it, and sometimes there's a second check. So that's the situational context we're dealing with. The prediction, so let's once again take a stop here. So if the doctor knew whether a given patient's results are likely to contain a tumor or not, according to its Gleason score, would give them an unfair advantage. I think that's pretty fair to say. So if you knew with certainty. I'm going to move to the last little bit after we talk quickly about some of the more straightforward things, which are related to what are we putting into the system. So we're putting labeled images into the system. We're trying to figure out what the Gleason score is and determine whether the patient has cancer or not. And if we get those results and we apply them, what we're going to want to do is we're going to continue testing ones to see if there's any change and to see whether we missed something the first time. And we're probably going to get people that are either panels of experts and or other biopsies as well to teach the machine. So that's pretty straightforward. The decision that the doctor in this case is going to make is, okay, based on what I see here, am I going to recommend treatment or not? Or recommend further scans or not? So it's more about what do we do next? And once I've delivered this assessment, what is my real intent? Well, patient survival is obviously an intent. I also want to minimize the chances of treatments. These are uncomfortable. I also don't want to overly scare people. There's this, call it normative factor here that's really challenging as a doctor to know that you're doing the right thing. And it would seem that AI is a really, really, really good fit up until this point because it can probably do this pretty effectively. Obviously, the outcome is pretty straightforward, that we're optimizing for decreased fatalities owing to prostate cancer. So prostate cancer is one of the ones that if you catch it early, you're likely to survive. So we're talking like 98% of the people who catch it within 5 years, they'll last. They're gonna last for at least 5 years, and it's like 96% to 15 or 16 years. So high degree of survival, but you got to catch it, right? So we're optimizing for earlier and accurate detection. Let's talk a little bit about these normative human factors, though, because this is where the rubber really meets the road. So do actors know with certainty they're making the right decision? Definitely not. Definitely not. Do they need to explain their decision process? Yes, they do. And are there policies? Yes, there are. There's a lot of academic rigor in making sure that the right treatments are applied and certain policies are followed. So AI now has to work around these two things: explainability and certainty. What is the threshold? Well, right now, the series of 2 doctors is 97.8% accurate. That really shapes your MVP, doesn't it? At the end of the day, if you deliver something that it only hits 80%, it's going to be roundly rejected because it doesn't actually exceed the capability of the status quo solution. How serious are mistakes? Well, very, very, very serious. Who bears the mistake? Well, it's probably the patient, and then the doctor, and then the hospital, and then insurance, but definitely the patient. And the seriousness of this, I think, is really echoed in this really, really great statement from Richard Rudner from 1963 in his commentary on value judgments, where he says, and I quote again, "Before we can accept any hypothesis, the value decision must be made in the light of the seriousness of a mistake, that the probability is high enough or that the evidence is strong enough to warrant its acceptance." So we're always balancing the seriousness of what we're actually doing when it comes to making mistakes versus the strength of the evidence. And when we look at this in a typical confusion matrix style view, going through it, like if we look at it when we're thinking, what does getting it wrong mean? Well, in the true positive case, patient has cancer, the judgment that the doctor performs is, yes, go get treatment, and the patient survives. The doctor, the hero. And the true negative case, the patient doesn't have cancer, the doctor recommends no treatment, and it's one of those better safe than sorry things where you were glad that you actually got tested. The false side is where it starts getting uncomfortable. So the patient doesn't have cancer, the doctor thinks they have cancer, so they recommend you get treatment, and then there's all this discomfort, all this stress, all these lawsuits, especially in litigious societies. Now, the worst one here is the case where the patient actually does have cancer and they are told not to get treatment and the cancer spreads, which only gives them a 7% survival rate. So against this backdrop, we have to really start thinking about what type of product we're building and what we have to make sure we are looking at when we're assessing whether it's actually doing the right thing. So this is part of that judgment bit, where if you don't take this into account, you're likely to build something that doesn't necessarily get that product market fit you're looking for. So let's read our AI mission statement. When a patient gets a biopsy, if we can enable the oncologist, the doctor, to predict whether a given biopsy image contains a cancerous tumor or not, they would have an unfair advantage when making effective recommendations on treatment plans and would deliver accurate biopsy assessments, realizing improved patient treatment outcomes indicated by increased patient survival rates. We put that on the wall, and that becomes the aligning mission statement for this overall initiative and the group that's going to deliver this value. So with that, I want to kind of conclude with a couple of takeaways here. So what I hope you've seen here is that the AI Canvas is not designed to answer how things. And I said this earlier, but I'm going to say it again. This isn't about how we're going to build something or how we're going to get the data or how we're going to implement it. This is more about those who, why, and what questions, the human side of this, right? So whose problem? Who's going to implement this? Who's going to act on it? What value does it actually provide to our customers or to our users? Why should we use AI? Are we actually ready to use AI? Answering those up front is much more comfortable than if we answer them way later. It's almost that whole like solution and then technology rather than technology and then solution. It doesn't work in that order. And this is what I think is going to increase the implementability and the viability of our AI products. I hope it's also been clear that you have to make this a team sport. So bringing all of the perspectives to the table to make sure that you have those conversations and you actually finish them. Because once again, it's going to drive that implementability and the fitness of your AI product. And the last little bit, and I think that this is one of those things you got to kind of park in the back of your mind, is this is AI versus this uncertainty, not AI versus the humans. And if you can frame it that way, you're going to create a situation where the human is not the person that's to blame, but we're going to uncover these biases and these policies that weren't necessarily good that we already used, that the AI is helping us surface. So creating that safety is important. And let's be honest, sometimes the AI gets it wrong. But if you don't incorporate the people at the front end of it, they're never going to give it the chance, and then they're never going to get that change. So hopefully you've gotten something out of this chat, and we'll just conclude it right there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley, for that great presentation. I appreciate it. We are now opening the conversation to audience questions, and I've received a couple here through chat.
Okay.
So let's start with this. Could you substitute the AI in AI Canvas with any new technology that is being hyped blockchain? Is the approach, in other words, unique to AI, or is this a good idea irrespective of the domain or technology that we're dealing with?
I love that question. I hadn't thought of that, but it kind of makes sense. You may end up building a blockchain-specific canvas that incorporates some of these normative things when it comes to blockchain. But I would always say that building a canvas is a good idea. And I'm sure that if you just type right now, you go blockchain model canvas, you're probably going to come up with somebody else's view of the solution dimensions that need to be considered before you go and build something. So while right now it might be a somewhat good fit, there's probably a better fit that always overlays on top of this idea of just aligning the organization around the problem we're solving and the value we expect to get from it. So I think it's possible, but you might also get more mileage out of a more catered one.
Yeah, I mean, the canvas and the specific questions might be tailored to a different set of technologies or a different domain, but definitely the overall concept is not unique to AI. I completely agree with you. Now, there is okay. I need this. Okay, so why would I need this when I have a lean canvas? So what is the difference between the canvas that you presented and the lean canvas? Maybe is the question that's being asked here.
Okay, so the lean canvas, you almost, like, if I was going to do this, I would take my AI canvas and I'd probably also create the lean canvas in parallel, because the lean canvas also incorporates a lot of other surrounding considerations, i.e. what your revenue model, where your costs are going to come from, what your increments of success are going to be. So those are more tailored to how we're going to implement the business. This is more about the AI specific considerations. So don't necessarily substitute one versus the other at this point. I would say you probably want to do both, because what this was all designed to do was to do the AI fitness piece. So good feedback, though. It might be worth making another talk or kind of zooming out even further and seeing if there are other synergies between the two that may end up making a consolidated one. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ashley. That's appreciate the answer. Now, given the uncertainty associated with AI projects, do you feel that the Agile development methodology is a better fit than the traditional waterfall because we're learning as we progress?
Yes, Agile is definitely a really good way to do this. And some of that comes from the idea that machine learning and AI is inherently agile, and the use of feedback and training to improve the solution continuously is part of it. So I think that there's compatibility there. The agile approach also will allow you to build the minimum viable product, the MVP version of your solution, to make sure that you're on the right track. Now, what has happened in the past is people have built maximum viable AI products that ran directly into the humans on the other side of it, which is my hypothesis around some of the reasons why we've got the failure we have. So I highly recommend going with the minimum viable approach. You also will probably learn as you go which algorithm makes more sense, which variables to tune make more sense, whether you've incorporated enough data. If you do all that planning up front, you're really crossing your fingers. And having built a number of these things myself, I realized just how often I'm getting lucky, which meant that I had to do a lot of iteration. And I hats off to you if you manage to succeed. It might work, but I think you drastically improve your chances of success by pursuing a more iterational approach like Agile.
Okay, so could you maybe just comment at a high level as to alignment with business objectives and executive support? Maybe there's a concern here that's sort of hotly debated line of thinking here that if we have we covered, based on what you presented here, business alignment and executive support, and to make sure that we have that lined up front.
Okay, so I think the question is, how do we make sure that we align executive and business? Is that your interest?
With the AI project or product development that you're working on? Yes.
Well, I think in the modern context, they kind of follow each other, where in the absence of like the executive support, you probably won't get the resources, you probably won't get the access that you need, and you're probably going to get what they do at the Pentagon in the United States is they process stuff to death, because all of the business view of it will say we need to socialize all this stuff before we can present it to the execs, because we have to make sure we got all of our bases covered. And I think that by getting the exec viewpoint good up front, and maybe even incorporating their views in the AI Canvas and discovery session, you can really get them to realize this is the transformative benefit that I'm going to get, and I'm going to need to invest. At the end of the day, I didn't say how much money this was going to cost, but it's obvious that I'm going to have to do something, and it's probably going to be expensive. So the executive support, in my opinion, likely leads the business view, and then that frames the problem and the solution space for the technical view. But at the end of the day, as I said earlier, this is a team sport. And the alignment is best if it happens all at the same time, because you start getting that institutional inertia and that momentum behind something that is much harder to kill if you didn't get that. Like, if you have to get consensus from a whole bunch of people separately, everybody has their own view, everybody has a different incentive to implement it. So align early and probably bring them all in is my recommendation in this case. But in the absence of executive support, and they say it at length in here, and you see it in day-to-day, you're in trouble. I do want to say one more thing, though, is that the only people who can spend $500+ million a year are executives. And like at the very, very beginning, the people that are most incentivized to ensure that the company is not disrupted by AI are executives. So I think you almost naturally have a good well of sponsorship there that you can tap into to make this happen. But it might be different in your context. I don't know.
Okay. Now, thank you for that answer. Now, there is another question or a request to maybe discuss the applicability of this process to smaller firms versus large companies. I mean, we're talking about executives, we're $500 million, we're automatically implying large organizations. Could you comment about the utilization of this process and the AI Canvas in smaller firms?
Okay, so it's a really good question, and it's a really good question because it makes it hard for us to say whether it's good here or not there, or not good there and you're good here. Like, but when it comes down to it, the people on the other side of your AI solution are going to be, there's going to be people on the other side of it, no matter if you're coming from a big firm or a small firm. And that's what I'm hoping that you get out of this part of it, is incorporating the people approach, regardless of whether you're a big company or a small company. The other thing is, in my experience, I've seen canvases come in handy in really small companies. And obviously alignment happens faster. Things happen a little bit quicker because we're just working as a small group. There's 4 of us around a table. We're gonna get this done. But it also is really helpful in bigger companies as well. So I would say this is a generally applicable technology. You just might get results quicker in a smaller company just because of the inherent dynamics of being a smaller company. The end of this, though, is that if you're pursuing this kind of an approach where you're sizing up the solution space early, this really leads you down a path that is common with big companies and small companies as well, which is you're going to do some more discovery, you're going to assign some value to it, and you're going to build stuff. The other thing about being a big company is that there may be constraints around that you need to talk about up front. So this might be more helpful in that regard. This book was not necessarily industry or company size specific, but the kind of conversation we're dealing with here, it sometimes ends up in, it's good to align a lot of people with this kind of conversation. So you might get similar or better mileage out of it, depending on your context. So I don't think I answered the question. But the summary is, yeah, implement it everywhere.
That's good. It makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. And now, once an AI canvas has been created, just curious about your thoughts on updating it throughout the project once we've had a chance to benefit from more learning and more progress and maybe had a clarified perspective. What are your thoughts on updating the canvas once after you started the project?
So what I'm hoping is that when people have got an AI canvas, it is a living artifact. It's not a static artifact. It's not something that we did once and then we forgot about. It serves as a reminder of the assumptions we baked into the process at the outset. Obviously, as those things change, your mission might change. What you're expecting to get out of it might change. So you can update this canvas anytime. It also serves as a reminder for that optimization criteria or things that you thought about the situational context. I would hope that you continually update this artifact. I know that the reality is that sometimes these things get stale. The other part of this is that these implementations aren't always done in the order of days and weeks. And the people that are around the table at the beginning might have forgotten where they were at when they had that conversation. So to show this was the canvas on, day one, and here we are 90 days later, here's the canvas now, and here's what we thought, and we made these changes. Oh, okay, let's make sure that actually still aligns. So hopefully, yeah, you would continually update it. It would be beneficial, I think, to keep doing that. And it's not heavyweight. It's not like we're writing, 4-page essay every single time we change this. We're changing a bullet point on, maybe a sticky or something, right? So it's not that bad.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate that perspective. Now, is there, any reason why anybody would not want to do this? Are there any barriers to the AI canvas adoption that we as a community need to discuss and think about and educate our community in order to get them to use this useful tool, if you will?
So yeah, so I guess the first question is, why wouldn't you do this? You wouldn't do this if you were 100% certain on exactly what you wanted to do, and you knew exactly the problem you were solving, and we would just be writing this down for the sake of writing it down. And you're almost approaching this with this isn't worth me even thinking about or talking about. This might not get as much mileage out of one-person companies, but I think it could. So the barriers side of it, I think, is related primarily to awareness. So you'll hear the idea of an AI canvas floating around, and you'll listen to podcasts, and you'll see that it is an idea. I think the awareness side hasn't come online yet. I also think that people may have already baked a process that kind of works for them, and they're going to have that realization moment if they're in that 87% of groups or organizations that aren't delivering value to production, or are having 85% of them are having failures. If they're in that group, there's the institutional change that needs to be made that doesn't always come easily either, because now you might have to reinvent your process to do your discovery, which I think is a challenge anywhere. Change is hard. But I think those are the two main ones. I also have another one. I'm thinking about it. A lot of this work is done by very technical people, and I don't think that the broader community right now has incorporated all of the good ideas from design thinking yet. And being the really strong technical community that it is, it takes the right kind of people to come in with that perspective to be able to gel well. So I think that that might also be a challenge, but I think that the broader kind of environment has kind of realized this, and people that are into design thinking now have accessible AI capability. Right? Let's be honest, like you can do a couple of weeks of courses and figure out enough to be somewhat dangerous. So I think that we'll see that kind of go away over time.
Okay. Now I am just looking. It looks like we addressed all the audience questions. So maybe I'll give you the chance to give us any final thoughts before we wrap up that you'd like to share with us before we conclude.
Okay. So any final thoughts? Think about the people. There's going to be people on the other side of this, and if you don't make an AI canvas, just think of that person on the other side of whatever you're building that is going to be affected, enabled, disrupted, whatever it is. And by thinking from that lens, I think you will build you're more likely to build something that they either want to use, that can help them, or that they are less likely to resist. So,
okay. Thank you, Ashley. So to summarize before we conclude here, a significant percentage of AI investments are being spent on products that don't deliver value to their organizations. Systematically evaluating AI project ideas is important to ensure AI solutions is a good fit for the business problem being addressed. The AI Canvas is an interesting tool that can help us evaluate AI product ideas with the goal of improving product selection. I thank Ashley for a great presentation, and I thank all of you who joined us online. And to see more free content like this, visit our website at ai.science and log in to access slides from this and other sessions. Also, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, ML Papers Explained, to get notified about all the live sessions and other free content we publish. This concludes our event. Thank you for watching.
Thanks, everyone.